Welcome, you deep divers, to the ultimate quest. We are not here today to talk about volatile stocks or, the latest political squabble.
No, definitely not.
We are embarking on a romantic exploration of identity, a journey to discover the most valuable thing you own, the genuine self.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Today, we are hunting for that magnetic core identity that remains untouched, even when, say, the promotion fails to materialize or the market tanks or, the external world just stops applauding.
Yeah.
Our mission is to take a deep dive into the truly fascinating sources you shared, all centered on one ultimate prize, defining who you are without your title or external validation.
And we've pulled together an incredible stack of frameworks. I mean, we're moving from the deep shadows of psychoanalysis all the way to the high-performance illumination of elite coaching, right?
And even global culture reports.
Okay.
The question guiding us is pretty simple, really. What is the true resilient bedrock of self-worth?
Because the reality is most of us, and this includes like the highest achievers,
No, absolutely.
we build our entire sense of worth on extremely brittle external supports. That degree, that achievement award, what our peers think.
Right. We invest our entire identity into a job title or maybe a relationship status.
So what happens then when those things inevitably shift or just vanish?
Well, that's the external trap, isn't it? That's what we have to understand first before we can even begin to figure out how to escape it.
Okay, let's unpack this crucial structure then. We'll journey through Tim Gallwey's revolutionary inner game.
Which is fascinating stuff.
Totally. Then dive into the psychological needs defined by the self-determination theory, dissect the 4 non-negotiable factors of fulfillment, and then really push the boundaries completely with the radical, almost existential concept of ego death.
Wow, yeah. That's a big one.
But we have to start, I guess, with the architect of that brittle self.
Yeah.
The ego.
Right. So when we talk about the ego, especially in the context of self-worth, we have to recognize that its definition is complex. It kind of wears 2 very distinct hats, according to our sources.
Okay, I know you love the dense structural definition, so hit me with the technical one first. What is the ego, like structurally speaking?
Okay, happy to oblige. There's the classic Freudian definition, the ego as agency.
Agency.
Yeah, this is the structural model where the ego mediates the primal needs of the ego, the chaotic instincts and desires.
Right, the messy stuff.
Exactly. And the harsh, moralistic demands of the superego are internalized conscience.
So it's like the traffic cop in your head.
That's a great way to put it. The negotiator, trying to keep the psyche grounded in reality while balancing these often impossible demands.
Okay, so the ego, in that traditional sense, is actually necessary for survival, for just functioning, right? For reality testing.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the mechanism that stops me from just screaming for immediate gratification or, I don't know, stealing a pen from the studio because the Eid said so.
Precisely. It is essential for managing daily life.
Yeah.
But then you have the second and maybe more relevant definition when we're discussing identity. And this aligns more with Paul Federer's concept of the I experience or ego, a sense of self.
Experience.
Yeah. It's one's subjective, continuous sense of being. It's derived from the ongoing flow of bodily sensations and our mental relations in respect to time and content. Just the feeling of being.
That I experience, that's like that unbroken subjective thread of being you right now, regardless of what job you have or like what shirt you're wearing.
Exactly.
It's the core feeling of existence. But wait, is that feeling innate? Or is it more like a constructed shield we slowly build?
Ah, good question.
Yeah.
It is absolutely fundamentally a construct. It's not something we're born with fully formed.
Really?
Yeah, Jean Piaget's work showed us that the journey begins very early. In the sensorimotor stage, which is around 15 to 24 months,
Okay.
we see the beginning of self-awareness.
Oh, I think I know where you're going. The famous Rouge test, right?
Yes, the Rouge test. So a baby has a spot of rouge placed on their nose, and they're shown a mirror. If they try to wipe the spot off the mirror, they lack self-awareness.
Yeah.
But if they realize the spot is on their own nose and reach up to touch it, that is the very first critical step in the formation of the ego, the I. They realize their body is a distinct, separate object.
That's amazing. A tiny experiment that dictates the foundation for us later craving like a VP title.
Well, maybe not dictates, but it's the starting point.
Right. Because fast forward a few years or a decade, and that distinct construct meets society.
And this is where the conformity trap is sprung. We see this progression clearly in models like Jane Levinger's stages of ego development.
Okay.
When individuals hit the conformist stage, usually in early adolescence.
Right, teenager time.
Exactly. The need to belong and conform to group rules is dominant. You start measuring your worth almost entirely by external acceptance.
So if you are accepted, you are worthy. If you have the right car, the right partner, or most importantly in our context, the right title, then you fit. That desperate need to fit sets the stage for that external dependence, needing validation from the external world.
Indeed. And if that's the setup, this dependency on outside scaffolding, then we really have to confront the crux of external validation. Our sources contained a great, really vigorous debate on whether self-worth is even possible without it.
Oh, yeah. The Reddit discussion we looked at really summarized this conflict perfectly. One user, MentalRain9586,
Right?
argued quite forcefully that external validation, specifically love and recognition from others, is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, their argument was highly provocative. They suggested that internal worth rings hollow otherwise.
Like it's just talk.
Kind of. They compared it to thinking your house is worth, say, $5 million when the market clearly dictates it's only worth $1 million.
Ouch.
Yeah. They said our worth to be loved cannot be dissociated from others actually loving us. If you think you're worthy of respect but everyone treats you poorly, is your internal belief just? Well, delusion.
That's a really challenging question. But the counterpoint, the argument for pure self-validation, was equally compelling, I thought.
It was. It insists that true worth comes from being like a best friend to yourself.
Yeah.
Recognizing your core values, totally independent of others' words or actions.
Yeah, and the core philosophical issue there being external validation hinges on things completely out of your control.
And tying that back to the ego, anything out of your control presents a kind of existential threat to your constructed identity, doesn't it?
Totally.
Which is why we crave that external praise so much. And it leads us perfectly into Ernest Becker's really profound theory on the ego's primary foundational defense mechanism.
Okay, so the ego protects us from negative feelings, we know that, but you're saying the ultimate protection is against something far larger than just, like, hurt feelings.
Oh, way larger. It is entirely existential. Becker proposed in his work that pretty much all human activity, particularly the construction of culture and status, is largely driven by unconscious efforts to deny and ultimately transcend death.
Wow, okay.
The ego constantly uses defense mechanisms, including reality distortion, frankly, to cope with this ultimate unsolvable problem of mortality.
Wait. So when I spend, like, 2 hours perfecting my company biography, or when I agonize over my seniority level, I'm not just seeking status.
Well, you are seeking status, but why?
Okay.
According to Becker, that obsession with your title could be seen as your ego's somewhat pathetic, tiny defense mechanism against the terrifying reality of your own eventual demise.
Oh, my God. That's heavy. But it makes a weird kind of sense.
Doesn't it? If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes, absolutely. A workplace title is like a tiny perishable shield against mortality. It gives you a sense of superiority within your social group, a feeling of belonging, perceived stability in a fundamentally unstable world.
That explains so much of the rigid adherence to corporate hierarchy. It's not just about the money or the power.
Not fundamentally, no.
It's about existential safety. Becker argued that we collectively reinforce our core beliefs by identifying with social groups, creating feelings of superiority. It's like a collective defense mechanism against uncertainty.
Look at the sheer performance of status seeking in any large organization. Why does someone cling so tightly to a corner office or refuse to delegate tasks they could easily hand off?
Right.
It's often not about operational necessity. It's the ego desperately trying to solidify its place in the world, believing that if their social position is high enough, they are somehow, exempt from, or at least shielded from, the ultimate uncertainty of human existence.
That the title is armor.
Exactly. And heavy armor at that.
Okay, the armor is on. It's heavy. If mortality is the foundation of the problem, how do we shift the battlefield entirely? How do we stop listening to that internal voice demanding we keep the armor polished?
Now we pivot. Let's move into the world of performance coaching and the internal solution. This brings us beautifully to Tim Gallwey's revolutionary insight. This was developed back in the 1970s, and it's the foundation of his whole inner game philosophy.
Right, Gallwey? He was a Harvard tennis captain, and he noticed something pretty incredible, didn't he?
He did. He saw that students often improved dramatically when he stopped trying to teach them conventionally, when he just stepped back.
Really? How does that work?
He realized that the greatest obstacle to performance wasn't external. It wasn't the opponent on the other side of the net or the difficulty of the task itself, but the internal commentary, the self-talk. People learn better alone, without the critical nagging voice of instruction, judgment, and importantly, self-blame.
Okay, let's nail down this core conflict he identified. He divided the self into two characters, self one and self two.
That's right. Self one is the inner critic. It's the conscious, judgmental self, the teller.
The annoying one.
The very annoying one. It's the critical, nagging commentary voice that throws blame, remembers every single past failure, and generates tension and fear whenever you face a challenge.
It's creating the challenge itself sometimes.
It really is. And worse, it blames self too, which is the intuitive, instinctive, unconscious potential, the doer, with this toxic inner dialogue like, you missed that shot, you're too slow, you'll never be any good at this presentation.
Ugh, that voice is utterly toxic. And it's the definition of interference, isn't it? It's what stands between us and our best potential, whether we're swinging a tennis racket or trying to lead a meeting.
Which leads directly to his famous, really powerful equation. Performance, potential interference.
PI.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The interference self-1 is the true obstacle. And crucially, self-2 already knows how to perform. It's the body, the intuition, the inherent potential. Self-1 just gets in the way by constantly trying to control the performance consciously, by judging it.
Okay, but wait. If I'm just supposed to, focus on the seams of the tennis ball, won't my performance actually suffer because I'm not thinking about technique? How does Gallwey address the need for, actual skill acquisition?
That's the critical question, and it's where Gallwey's genius really shines. He found a brilliant way to bypass self-1, not by ignoring technique entirely, but by directing self-1's attention towards something. Well, something inconsequential to the judgment of success, something observational rather than judgmental or controlling.
Okay, so instead of telling a tennis player, keep your elbow straight, snap your wrist, which just leads to tension and overthinking.
Right, which is classic self-1 instruction.
What did he tell them instead?
He would instruct them to do something like focus on the seams of the ball as it comes across the net, or notice the exact location where the ball bounces on your side.
Just observe.
Just observe. This simple task of pure, non-judgmental observation absorbs the conscious mind, self-1, in a task that requires total focus. And that leaves self-2, the instinctive, potential self-free to act without tension, without judgment, without fear of failure.
That is such a profound mental hack. It's the ultimate lesson in letting go of control to actually gain mastery.
And we saw this play out so clearly in the demonstration he did with the novice volunteer at Queen's Club. Remember that?
Yeah, the woman who couldn't hit the ball consistently at all.
Right. So Gallwey didn't give her technical advice. He just asked her to say bounce out loud when the ball bounced on her side of the net and hit exactly when it made contact with her racket.
Simple instructions.
Very simple. But her focus became so deeply absorbed in these auditory cues that her critical self-1 was effectively silenced. And the result? She successfully hit the ball back and forth for several minutes without a single miss. It was astonishing.
Wow. The moment she stopped trying to make the shot right, she was right. It shifted her identity in that moment from, I am a bad player, to simply, I am an observer.
Exactly. And the sources emphasize that this applies across all sensory preferences, whether you're more visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. The underlying mechanism is pure, absorbed focus, which is the absolute opposite of internal self-criticism.
Okay, so tennis is one thing. How did he apply this in the corporate world? To reframe things like rigid job titles or performance metrics as an inner game.
Ah, yes, the AT&T example is perfect for this. They wanted to improve customer service courtesy levels.
Right, a classic corporate goal.
But just mentioning the word courtesy usually triggers self-1 instantly. Oh no, I have to be super polite now. Am I being judged? How am I doing?
Yeah, totally counterproductive.
So instead, Gallwey instructed the operators to focus on identifying the tones of the customer's voice. Was it loud, soft, angry, nervous? And also, crucially, to recognize those same tones in their own voice during the call.
Oh, brilliant. He turned a rigid external performance metric courtesy into a self-directed game of observation and awareness.
Precisely. It made the workplace more enjoyable and more productive because the focus was shifted entirely away from external judgment and toward internal, non-judgmental awareness.
Which must reduce stress massively.
Hugely. And it ties into Gallwey's broader model for sustained contentment at work, which our sources imply is necessary for avoiding burnout. This is the work triangle.
The work triangle.
It needs to be kept in balance. The 3 points are task, learning, and self-direction.
Ah, Okay, let's name those explicitly. So if we're focused too much on the task like the result, the title, the external goal.
Then we feel pressured, stressed, and eventually burn out.
Makes sense. And if we only focus on learning, just skill acquisition.
We can become frustrated if we never feel like we're applying the skills effectively or achieving anything tangible. But the third element, self-direction, that's the real key to inner worth here. It's the ability to choose how, when, and why you engage with the task and the learning. When all three are balanced, performance improves naturally, and satisfaction is maximized because you feel in control.
So the core practice here, and this seems essential for developing that resilient inner worth we're after, is non-judgmental awareness.
That is the practice.
Yeah.
The principle is simply asking questions that bring awareness, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, without layering judgment or interpretation on top.
Can you give us a simple, practical example, something someone listening right now could try?
Sure. Let's say you realize your neck hurts while you're driving. Instead of criticizing yourself for bad posture or being sloppy, that's self-one chiming in.
Right.
You simply pay attention, non-judgmentally, to the sensation of tension and the specific position of your head and shoulders. By just attending to it, observing it, you allow self-to, your body's innate intelligence, to instinctively find ways to ease the tension.
Okay. Less forcing, more allowing.
Exactly. Yeah. And the same principle applies to emotions. If you feel, say, anger or resentment toward a colleague, you can learn to function alongside the anger without being overwhelmed by it. You detach your core identity from that temporary emotional state. You observe it, you don't become it.
Okay, so we've established that the ego trap builds our worth on brittle titles and external stuff, and the inner game helps us minimize that internal interference, that self-one chatter. Now we move to the framework that really provides the foundation for building true, resilient, intrinsic worth. Self-determination theory, or SDT.
Yes, SDT. This is really the science of self-authorship. It's based on this powerful idea that humans possess three innate psychological needs.
Innate, like we're born needing them.
Exactly. And when these needs are satisfied, they are universally essential for self-motivation, well-being, and mental health. These are competence, autonomy, and relatedness.
Okay. Competence, feeling effective and capable, that makes sense. And relatedness, feeling connected and belonging, that seems intuitively vital too. But autonomy, that feels like where the real power lies for escaping the need for a title, right?
Absolutely. Autonomy is often misunderstood, though. People sometimes think it means just independence or even selfishness.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is the precise SDT definition.
Yeah.
It's the feeling of volition, the sense that your behavior is self-determined or self-authored.
Volition, like choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You feel like you are choosing your actions, acting with a sense of integrity and authenticity, even if the action itself is something you have to do externally.
I love that distinction. It's the difference between doing something because I have to versus doing something because I choose to, even if the external behavior looks identical.
Right.
It transforms the experience from feeling like forced compliance into feeling like authentic engagement.
Perfectly put. If you have a job title that demands a specific task, you can approach that task with low autonomy. I must do this or I'll get fired. Or high autonomy. I choose to master this task because it aligns with my personal goal of developing competence.
And the latter feels self-authored, even if the task came from outside.
Precisely. And this helps us get beyond extrinsic motivation, beyond that constant craving for external validation or the next shiny title.
Because SDT shows us that extrinsic motivation isn't just one thing, right? It's like a spectrum.
Exactly. It varies widely in autonomy. On one end, you have purely external regulation, acting only out of fear of punishment or for a direct reward. Very low autonomy.
Okay.
But as you internalize the motivation, as you make it more your own, it becomes much more beneficial for your well-being. The sweet spot, the most beneficial type of extrinsic motivation, is called integrated regulation.
Integrated regulation. Okay, that sounds a bit complex. Can you give us a practical example to clarify that spectrum leading up to it?
Sure. Let's use exercise. Lots of people exercise for extrinsic reasons, right?
Definitely.
So, 1, external regulation. You exercise only because your doctor tells you to avoid a negative health outcome. That's low autonomy.
Got it. Fear-based.
2, identified regulation. You exercise because you've thought about it and you identify that health is important to you personally. You endorse the goal, but you still might not enjoy the run itself. That's medium autonomy.
Okay, getting closer.
3, integrated regulation. This is when the value of exercise is fully assimilated. It's brought into congruence with your other core values, maybe discipline or vitality or self-respect. You perform the action not necessarily for the pure intrinsic enjoyment of it, but because it feels like a fully chosen essential part of who you are.
Wow. Okay, so when you hit integrated regulation, the external title of athlete or fit person becomes kind of irrelevant.
Exactly. Because the behavior is now part of your authentic identity, a fundamental choice you endorse.
This aligns perfectly with the global search for fulfillment we see in our sources. People aren't just chasing titles anymore.
Not at all. And that search isn't just philosophical. It's driving the modern labor market in a huge way. Fulfillment is now seen as just as important as higher pay for many people.
The stats were pretty striking. 83% of employees prioritize meaning in their day-to-day work.
Yep. And nearly 70% said they would change employers for better fulfillment, and get this, a full third would even take lower pay for a more fulfilling role.
That's huge. It shows a massive shift in values. So how do the sources actually define this crucial feeling of fulfillment?
It's defined as a feeling of deep contentment or completeness. It comes from accomplishing goals that feel genuinely important to us or attaining our highest personal aspirations.
It's internal.
Very much so. It happens when we identify strongly with a purpose and connect to others in deeply meaningful ways.
This is where we build that internal scaffolding, right? The report isolates 4 main factors that influence this deep internal fulfillment, moving way beyond the simple metrics of a job description or title.
Yes. The 4 factors are balance, community connection, growth, and purpose.
Okay, let's start with balance. It seems basic, but in this context, it's really about having high autonomy over your time, isn't it?
Correct. Balance means having the time and the autonomy to accomplish things effectively, both at work and personally. It's not about a rigid 50-50 split every single day, but more of a flexible sliding scale. And it has to be supported by the organizational culture.
I remember the example in the source of Dow's Design Your Day program.
Precisely. That program gave employees genuine control and autonomy over their schedules. By empowering them to balance work and personal needs autonomously, the organization fundamentally respects the employee as a whole person.
Which must dramatically increase internal fulfillment and self-respect, way more than just a title bump.
Absolutely. Then factor 2 is community, connection, and belonging. And this requires nurturing inclusion and treating employees holistically.
Holistically, meaning more than just their job function.
Exactly. It means going beyond simple team-building exercises. Leaders need to genuinely learn about employees' interests and passions outside of work. Yes. And enable them to pursue these interests, whether it's a hobby, volunteering for a social cause, or managing family obligations. The idea is you can bring your whole self to work, not just the narrow skill set required by your title.
That feels so much more human. Okay, and growth. You mentioned this isn't just about climbing the career ladder and gaining a new title.
No, true growth in this fulfillment context is about progression and mastery that goes far beyond just promotions and pay raises.
Like what?
It includes things like mentorship opportunities, getting involved in special projects that stretch you, dedicated skill development, anything that helps employees become genuine experts in their craft and feel truly competent. It directly satisfies that crucial SDT need for competence.
Okay, makes sense. Finally, purpose. This really feels like the ultimate destination of the whole anti-title philosophy we're exploring.
It really is. It's perhaps the ultimate rejection of chasing purely external goals. Leaders need to consistently communicate the organizational purpose, sure, but the real magic happens when they actively help employees define and accomplish goals that are personally meaningful to them.
And this ties back to that idea of self-concordance, right?
Exactly. Self-concordance states that the goals we pursue should be those the individual finds genuinely important and aligned with their deep, authentic values.
Not goals pursued just for status, or goals that others like parents or peers or even an old job title deem important.
Absolutely. As one source put it pretty starkly, if you pursue goals based mainly on external pressure or expectations, they will live someone else's life.
Wow.
This emphasis on authentic, self-authored goals is the very heart of durable intrinsic worth. It's choosing your own path, regardless of the title it confers.
Okay, we've talked about building internal worth, dismantling the reliance on titles. But now we have to confront the ultimate philosophical and psychological reset. It sounds intense.
It is intense.
If the ego is the construct that keeps us functional, built on titles and memories and social roles, what happens when it just dissolves completely? Let's define this radical dissolution. Ego death.
Right. Ego death is defined in the literature as a temporary but complete loss of subjective self-identity. It's a profound dissolution of all identity and ego constructs.
Complete loss. What does that feel like?
People describe the sensations in really extreme terms. The disintegration of boundaries between oneself and the world, a total loss of self-awareness, a feeling of oceanic boundlessness, sometimes even the temporary loss of bodily ownership.
That sounds simultaneously terrifying and maybe incredibly liberating, especially when you, come back.
It's often described exactly like that, a feeling of rebirth upon re-entry, coupled with tremendous relief and often profound insight. However, the process of transition itself, the actual dissolving, can elicit feelings of real death.
Actual death.
Yes, because you lose all your previous reference points, your name, your job, your history, your sense of I. It can cause intense fear for that reason.
Okay, so our sources talked about two widely studied paths to this dissolution: drug-induced ego death, or die, and meditation-induced ego death, or MIDE. Let's compare the phenomenal experience of both, because the sources indicated they're actually quite different experiences.
They really are. So DID is typically achieved via psychedelics, things like LSD or psilocybin. And of course, the outcome is highly dependent on setting the person's mindset and the environment.
Right.
But crucially, DID is often characterized by what researchers call phenomenal richness.
Phenomenal richness,
Meaning rich sensory content, vivid perceptual abnormalities, maybe complex hallucinations. The sensory experience is often very intense and detailed.
So in DID, it's like the ego, the director of the experience, the sense of I is gone, but the high-definition sensory movie keeps playing.
That's a good analogy.
Yep.
And research suggests this might happen because of reduced sensory information gating in the brain. The usual filters are temporarily removed, allowing a flood of sensory input to be perceived, even while the narrative sense of self has completely vanished.
Wow. Okay, now contrast that with MIDE, meditation-induced ego death, which connects deeply to ancient spiritual traditions, like Buddhism.
Right. MIDE is strongly linked to the realization of anatta, the Buddhist concept of no self, the idea that there's no permanent, unchanging soul or self.
Which directly challenges the ego we build around titles and permanence.
Exactly. And it's also linked to achieving deep states of samadhi, often translated as complete meditative absorption or concentration. In true samadhi, there's described a complete merging of subject and object. All sense of self and other disappears entirely.
Let's pause on that jargon for a second. Anatta, that's the understanding that the self we cling to is really just an illusion, right? Built from constantly changing components like memories, feelings, physical sensations, and yes, titles.
Precisely put. It fundamentally dismantles the need for that permanent, fixed, titled self we discussed back in Section 1.
Okay. And the critical difference in the experience of MIDE compared to DID.
It's the sensory component. While DID often retains or even enhances phenomenal richness, MIDE is typically characterized by a cessation of self-related thought and a significant reduction in phenomenal richness.
Less sensory input.
Much less. It's often described as objectless awareness or pure consciousness, devoid of the usual framework of time, space, and even body sense. It's more like an empty, profound stillness, not a vivid movie.
That is truly fascinating. The path of chemically induced ego loss involves vivid sensory detail, while the path of disciplined spiritual practice seems to lead towards pure, objectless awareness. It highlights that the ego isn't just a storyteller, but also maybe a sensory filter.
It certainly seems to function that way. But regardless of the path taken, the core psychological process of ego dissolution appears similar in some key ways, leading us to the really extraordinary therapeutic power of this temporary state.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for practical application. The therapeutic benefits. Ego dissolution is positively correlated with mental health improvements across the board, isn't it?
Yes, the research is quite consistent on this. There's a strong correlation with reductions in depression, anxiety, and even profound lasting improvements in things like addiction and substance use disorders.
Oh, what's the mechanism?
The experience temporarily relaxes change-resistant beliefs and the ego's deeply ingrained defense mechanisms, the very ones Becker talked about.
Okay, so since we established earlier that the ego's primary job includes reality distortion to defend against existential anxiety, temporarily dissolving that defense must create a massive window for change, right?
Exactly. It creates a temporary window of heightened neuroplasticity. The brain becomes more flexible. The individual is given this rare opportunity for deep therapeutic cognitive and behavioral change because the deeply ingrained patterns of thought like I'm a failure or I must maintain this status at all costs are loosened up.
So you can examine them?
Yes, they can be critically evaluated from a more neutral, detached perspective.
Yeah.
It allows the individual to see themselves almost from the outside, realizing that the self they usually identify with is, in some sense, a limiting illusion.
Okay, this is maybe the most profound part for me. If the ego, the self-construct, the part built from titles and memories and social roles, is temporarily dead, who or what is the one observing this magnificent, maybe terrifying process? That observer must be the true identity, wasn't it?
This is the critical philosophical point, absolutely. And it leads directly to the concept of the witness consciousness.
The witness.
Yes. This is described as the silent awareness that simply observes the experience, the thoughts, the sensations, the dissolution itself. It's considered the innermost part of us that remains constant and unchanged, existing beyond the temporary self-construct, beyond the biography, beyond the title.
That feels like true freedom, the realization that your fundamental existence, that witnessing awareness is permanent and constant, even if your job title, your wealth, your relationships, even your physical body are temporary.
It's a profound shift in perspective. Yet we must acknowledge the necessity of the ego for everyday life. The state of dissolution is temporary and, frankly, unsustainable for functioning in the world.
Right, you can't stay there.
No. The ego is necessary to navigate society, to form meaningful relationships, to plan for the future, and quite simply to avoid psychosis, to tell ourselves apart from others and the environment.
So the goal isn't permanent ego destruction, which sounds, frankly, terrifying and probably impossible.
Definitely not. The goal is more like a healthy renegotiation of its role. It's about using the insight gained from its temporary dissolution to realize that our true nature exists beyond the constraints of titles, memories, and others' expectations.
It allows us to hold our ego more gently, maybe, knowing it's a necessary tool, a function, but not our absolute core identity.
Exactly. It's a tool, not the totality of who you are. Hashtag tag tagged outro.
Wow, what an incredible journey we've been on today. We started with the ego as this fragile architect of self, kind of desperate for external titles and affirmation, almost as a collective defense against mortality.
Tracing it right back to Becker's ideas. Then we learned the path to functional freedom is really internal. First, by minimizing self-one's destructive interference through Tim Gallwey's amazing inner game.
Right, shifting focus away from that critical voice towards simple non-judgmental awareness, just noticing.
Just noticing. And finally, we saw the solid foundation of true, intrinsic worth being built on self-determination theory, cultivating that sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Yeah, and finding that deep fulfillment through those four factors: balance, community, growth, and purpose.
And then the ultimate, albeit temporary reset of ego death, provided that profound proof that your true existence, that witness, transcends any external title or role you might hold.
The central insight really remains. You are not your job. You are not your accomplishments. You are not what others think of you.
Right, the permanent you is that witness consciousness, the awareness that observes the temporary self-construct, the titles, the memories, all of it just passing through.
We've covered a lot of dense but hopefully really exciting ground today, and we would absolutely love to hear your take on this. What are your thoughts on self-fulfillment? What internal measure of worth are you focused on today that has absolutely nothing to do with your professional title?
Yeah, we'd love to know. Drop a comment and let us know.
And here is a final provocative thought for you to consider, kind of based on that student we discussed earlier, the one who felt they were merely living the life expected of me to finish some kind of university course.
Ah, yes. Living someone else's script.
Exactly. So the core question maybe isn't just who will I become, but perhaps more pointedly, what are the goals you are pursuing right now that others, maybe your past self, maybe society, maybe an old title you used to hold, think are important?
Rather than what you autonomously, authentically choose for yourself right now.
That feels like the crucial distinction.
That is the moment where true self-authorship really begins, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where you finally get to choose your own adventure, free from the weight of those external expectations.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the inner game of identity. Keep exploring, stay curious, dig deep.
And we'll catch you in the next one.